What's up, everybody? So I just got done watching the video that Jason and Francis did on Matt Moore's Kawisolation article last month. If you didn't see it, or if you don't remember it, you should check out the video because it has some really cool stuff in it. The idea of the article was that Kawhi, the two-time Defensive Player of the Year, is so good at one-on-one defense that opponents were game planning to take him out of the game, essentially sacrificing whoever Kawhi was guarding, taking him completely out the offense, so that Kawhi would therefore be out of the defense. Moore called that Kawisolation. And anyway, in the TYT Sports video, Jason mentions an email that I sent him about that article, where I was saying that just point blank on defense, wings can't have as much impact as the best bigs, the best defensive bigs. And, that's true. But there's another side to the coin, too, that because it's fairly rare for wings to have a really big defensive impact, it can add a dimension to their game that can vault them to the top of the league as far as overall impact. And Kawhi Leonard is a prime example of that. So let's take a look at how. The last time I was here, I was talking a lot about wings and small forwards on offense. That video that I made was about Carmelo Anthony and whether or not his actual impact as a player matched up to his reputation. And of course, if you haven't seen that, you should check that out too. But anyway, in that video, I showed some evidence that even for a high volume scorer like Melo, that in order to be a true major impact player as an offensive wing, one can't just be a volume scorer, that you either needed to be able to really create offense for your teammates, or that you had to be really efficient as a finisher. And that either one of those methods were ways to increase an offensive wing's overall impact. So in order to prove that for wings, creating offense or efficient scoring were methods for improving impact, I showed impact stats for like a veritable who's who of the highest scoring big wings of the last 40 years to illustrate that. So you could take a look at some of those names. All right. But if the methods in that article, that offensive-based article, were the only two ways that a wing could make a big impact, then you'd be hard-pressed to explain what happened in 2015 with Kawhi Leonard. Because in 2015, Kawhi averaged 26.6 points per 100 possessions, which would have put him on, but at the very bottom of that list of high volume scoring wings that I showed. He shot 56.7% true shooting, which is solid. That's a good percentage, but again, it wouldn't have put him at the top of that list of big scorers. And then he only had a 13% assist ratio, which actually would put him at the very bottom of that list as far as assist men. So if you look at that figure, you see that 13% assists is right down here on the far left at the very bottom. And so, based on this figure, if we're just looking at offensive impact, you would expect that in 2015, Kawhi would have been down towards, a not very impressive impact. But since that's such a recent season, we actually have impact study info available. And Kawhi actually finished very well. He was number 11 overall in the NBA in single season regularized adjusted plus minus, or RAPM, moving forward. And he really only finished about a point behind LeBron, who for one is LeBron, but for two was number 5 on the list. And so, LeBron's right there at the top of the league. Kawhi was right behind him. But on that other chart we just showed, LeBron was also at the top of the list, but he had a high assist percentage, and anybody with a low one was really at the bottom of the list. So how would Kawhi have bridged such a big offensive gap? Well, obviously, with his defense. In 2015, that was the first of Kawhi's Defensive Player of the Year seasons. He finished number 7 in the whole league in defensive RAPM. Now, number 1 on the list was a power forward center, as I would have expected. In this case, it was a guy named Draymond Green. And interestingly, Draymond and Kawhi physically are pretty similar. Draymond's a little bit bigger, but he's not necessarily much taller. But the difference is the position they play. Draymond's a big man. You just can't take him out of the game defensively the way you can Kawhi. But anyway, I digress. Kawhi was still right at the top of the league as far as wing defenders, and that helped him be near the top of the league overall, even though he didn't have a massive offensive impact. So then what's the ratio, right? Like, how important can defense be to wings? It's not, they can't do as much as the best big man, but, how do you compare essentially defensive impact versus offensive impact for a wing? It turns out it could be pretty important for them. So I just ran an article on Nylon Calculus about this. It was part 2 of the What is Andrew Wiggins Ceiling series. That's a tongue twister. Say that 3 times fast. But this article focused on defense. So I started by looking at an impact study that measured single season impact using RAPM for every year between 1998 and 2012. And the reason I picked that time window was, for one, I had a study available. A guy named Matt Johnson had put it together. But for 2, the last time in that last, those figures that I showed, we were using that, WOWY, the with or without you measure as an impact stat. And that's something that's only effective over years. So I wanted every defender that I came up with to be someone that was a veteran, that had had a whole career, so that we could get their WOWY score and have it make sense. So anyway, I looked at that study, and I grouped all 1,605 players on the list according to their top 5 single season defensive RAPM scores. And then once the list was ordered, I pulled out the top 10 defensive wings according to that method. And here are the resulting top 10. You see Shane Battier's on top with a score in this method of 4.3. And then you've got some other, well-known defenders of the last generation. Meta World Peace, back when his name was Ron Artest. Tony Allen, Luol Deng, Gerald Wallace, Doug Christie, Bruce Bowen, Iguodala, and Aram McKee. All right. So, as a reference, the top 12 defensive scorers using this method all belong to centers and power forwards, led by Mutombo, Garnett, and Duncan, who all had scores that were well over 6. So that just kind of gives you a frame of reference. These great defensive wings were having an impact on the wing, not as good as the best of the best big men, but it was still solid. It was still significant. So to see how significant, let's put together a similar impact versus effect plot, like the ones I did on offense. We'll use the same, with or without you regress scores as calculated on back picks by Ben Taylor. And we're going to do that for the best defensive wings versus their 15-year defensive RAPM score. That was a study actually done by Jeremiah Zingelman. And so the resulting figure looks like this. All right. So if you just look at it without thinking anything about math, you notice how similar this plot looks to some of those others that I showed earlier, how the impact increases almost perfectly with defensive impact. And what that tells us is that, much like, for the offensive guys, much like assist percentage as a measure of offense creation, or true shooting percentage as a effect of how efficient they score, much like those are important ways that a wing can increase his impact. Well, what this figure shows you is that defense is another one of those methods that's a very important way that a wing can increase his impact. So then the final question is, this list is mainly kind of defense type players. How does their overall impact compare with the impact of some of those big name high scoring wings we were looking at before? And the answer might surprise you. So let's check out this table. The primarily defense guys are highlighted in yellow on this table, right? And so, while you don't see any of those players at the very top of the list, at the GOAT area of the list, if you will, with Jordan and LeBron and Kobe, they're all up at the top. The defensive guys aren't that high, but they're well mixed with everyone else. You're seeing defensive players. Again, this is according to the Wowie R stat. So, this is just one stat. It's one estimate of impact. It's not perfect. But based on this method, it would certainly appear that being a defense or a primarily defense wing is a very valid way to be a high impact player, as high as, some of the really big offensive players. You see where Carmelo is on this list. A lot of the defensive guys are ahead of him. So, it strongly suggests that elite defense is a valid method for wings to make an impact, just as valid as elite scoring and offense. And it could also support the theory that Jordan and LeBron are in that GOAT category, that they separate themselves further from other wings because they're good at all three, right? They're high volume scorers at high efficiency. They create a lot of offense for teammates. And, oh, by the way, they're also great on defense. So, they've got the trifecta where the other names on this list just aren't as well rounded. So let's bring it home. In the caption for TYT Sports Kawisolation video, it asks, is Kawhi Leonard the best defender of a generation? The answer is no. I mean, he can't be, because of the position he plays. But his defense absolutely makes a big impact on games. And when you combine strong defense on the wing with strong offense, that's what makes him an MVP candidate. Jordan is considered by many to be the GOAT because of his awesome offensive abilities, but he did win a Defensive Player of the Year award. LeBron's making his own run at Jordan on that all-time history list with his own brand of outstanding offense. But as he says in the commercial, the most lasting image of his career right now is him turning into the Matrix and chasing down Andre Iguodala with that block in the finals. So, on the wing anyway, it certainly appears to be room for dominance on both offense and defense. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out the source articles for the data from this video in the captions below. Those articles are found on my blog, hoopslab.rotowire.com, and also on Nylon Calculus. All right, see you next time.